Mr. Elton. Good afternoon. Look at all these people coming to listen to Chuck Cook. Hopefully he'll be here in a minute. Ah, perfect. Ah, perfect.
Hey, Michael, how you doing, man?
I'm all right, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, good.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on and have a little chat about golf and things.
My pleasure. Looking forward.
This time where we're all just sat inside doing nothing.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot going through all these different webinars and things. It's been it's a lot more than normal, so it's cool.
Well, this might be the only time in a lifetime where all these people within the top of one industry are all almost available to talk to.
Yeah, that's true.
And have openly took on the invitations to come out and talk to everybody about careers, about golf, about experience, which I just think is amazing. It's been an amazing learning experience talking to so many different people who've got so many different stories to tell.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate that a lot of people have shared their information with me as I was learning, and owe them an awful lot. That's for sure.
Well, I sort of went trawling through the internet into all the different things, Chuck, that you've won, all the awards you've been given for coaching, all the players you work with, and where it all started, going back to Harvey Pennick.
Well, it's interesting. Probably I started off in golf as an assistant pro in Indiana, and I worked for a guy who had been Horton Smith's assistant pro, if you can imagine. So it goes back, Horton Smith was the winner of the first Masters. And so this guy was a phenomenal golf professional, a great player, great teacher, great bench pro, repairing clubs and things like that. And I learned an awful lot with him. So that was my initial beginning. So I was lucky to be with him. And then I had an opportunity to work with the Golf Digest schools when they started. We had John Jacobs and Bob Toski and Jim Flick and Peter Costas and Davis Love Jr. and Paul Runyon, amongst many others. So I was able to work with them for 10 or 11 years. And then, of course, living in Austin, learning from Harvey Pennick, also studying the golfing machine through Ben Doyle was a big influence on my life. And then in 1980, I started a golf academy in Austin, where I developed an advisory board of people. So I had Ralph Mann, who is a biomechanical engineer that did CompuSport at Grand Cypress and stuff. He worked for me. Dave Pells did our short game. We had Dick Coop, who was our psychologist, who worked with us on how to teach and then how to help our players play better. And then a guy named Al Vermeil is our fitness guy. And so this was 1980, and Al Vermeil was the number one. He was known as the godfather of power. So he was been the strength coach for the San Francisco 49ers, the Chicago Bulls when Jordan was there, and all that sort of stuff. So he had 9 world championship rings that he had.
Wow.
So we had this tremendous fountain of knowledge available to us. And that was really had a huge growth spurt into my career, being able to do that. And remember, this is 1980. So this is a long time ago. But
I mean, really, there you're almost ahead of the game, aren't you? bringing all these
we
experts together.
Yeah, we had a phenomenal teaching facility. We had 3 practice holes. We had bent grass, Bermuda grass, putting greens, chipping areas, short game areas, different sands in the bunkers, covered hitting. And this was long before a lot of the technology was available. But whenever anything new came out, we were on top of it. And we taught a lot of people then. Everybody wanted to come take lessons from us because we were way ahead of the game, that's for sure.
And it's only probably in the last 10 years that sort of concept has fed out into the field of play, from an amateur's perspective. So to think that, in 1980, you had already pulled together a group of experts, and the best people probably that you could have got hold of at that moment in time, into a board.
No, that's absolutely. It was amazing. We would do golf schools or golf clinics with each one of those guys there. And so we would do a golf school that would have a fitness element to it. So it would be a golf instruction and fitness. And so Al Vermeil would test people and then give them exercises to do and so on and so forth. And then Dick Coop with psychology, we would do a golf school with having a better mental game as the goal, as well as we would do teaching, work with them on regular mechanics and so on and so forth. But then we would have sessions out on the golf course on how to be, when to be conservative, when to be aggressive, and so on and so forth. And the same thing, Ralph had not been a golf biomechanist before. He had been a track biomechanist, and so he was an interesting guy. But anyway, so when we did these first clinics, he would measure people biomechanically. And so he had all of these dots on the 2 sides of the wrist and the elbows and the knuckles and the top of the head and the middle of the head and all these sort of things. And the report would come back where it would say how far you deviated from each one of these dots from the model.
Wow.
So it was this huge book. We had a book, it probably had 100 pages for one swing. And it would have the deviations from these dots. It was totally useless information, but it was the beginning anyway.
Oh, and as a coach, it just expands your mind, doesn't it? Past just the golf club to everything else.
Yeah, it was crazy, but it was fun. It was very enlightening. Back then, when measuring having the tour model and things was a lot different. It was a real strong grip is what most of the players had back then, and then sort of a left down the line, left arm chicken wing to fight the strong grip off. So it was a different model than what you see now, obviously, with the changes in equipment and fitness and all that sort of stuff.
And you can, for someone that's in 1980 to 2020, and we go for 40 years of coach, how much obviously the equipment change has been the big one that's obviously influenced the technique. But how has it influenced your teaching?
Yeah, you had to adapt. Needless to say, because the game changed completely. It's a totally different game now. The guys today play the best golf that's ever been played for a lot of reasons. One is equipment, one is fitness, one is just genetics. If you look, Jesse Owens, if he was running against Usain Bolt, he would have been 14 feet behind him when it was over with. And if you look at the NBA, the Basketball Association, when Wilt Chamberlain played, he was the only guy there that was 7 feet. Now 10% of the guys are 7 feet or more. And so for lots of reasons, golf has really progressed. And the biggest change has been because of the equipment. Really, in 2000, the ball changed, and after that, and some before that, but after that, that's when all of the equipment changed to suit the ball. So the clubs got longer, lighter, higher MOIs, and the people that grew up with that, the kids that grew up with that, if you think about, say, a Jordan Spieth in 2000, that grew up with that, they ended up swinging hard at the golf ball. I mean, really hard. And so it was a big change in things.
I mean, there have been some players who were almost a bit of a victim of technology in the way that you could learn to play the game in an era, and all of a sudden there's a big change in the ball, and that let's say their golf swings that work pretty well with the older technology, with the newer technology, just became almost like stuck in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, kids probably learn a completely different notion to
Absolutely.
What's done there.
Because they can hit it so far now. I mean, you can see this on the professional tours and so forth. But because they hit it so far now, a lot of golf instruction has been how to hit it straighter. Yeah. So you see a big change where it used to be a lot more legs and hands. You had to have good hands to control a ball that spun a lot. You had to make it go one way or the other. The turf condition wasn't as good and so forth. So again, good hands was a big deal. Whereas now, what you've seen, I think, changes in instruction is now you see the swing being controlled more by the bigger muscles. The hands are more passive to control the direction of the ball, so the ball doesn't curve as much. And I think you see other things that go with that have also changed. So fitness has changed as well. So people are learning about how to make their body faster, more explosive, all of that sort of stuff.
And I'd in my own mind that if we move away from a hands and arm swing that was, let's say, the older style, to a more rotational body movement where there's less manipulation with the club face, players also need to be stronger to produce that degree of speed with the body and rotation. And you see that in players, don't you?
No question.
You know what I mean? And I mean, one thing that really interests me, when I look back through all the players you coached, worked with, there must be over 100 PGA pros or tour players, X number of major champions. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting when I looked at the names, Payne Stewart, Jason Duffner, Keegan Bradley, was how different they were player to player.
Absolutely.
Because, you look back to Payne Stewart winning two US Open majors and how he swung the golf club. He looked great rhythm, a lot more upright, And then you look to Jason Duffner, completely different motion on the spectrum of swings. How did you decide? How did you decide what you were going to do with those players? Because they ultimately went on to win golf's biggest prizes.
Well, I wrote a book on it. One of the things that, working with Harvey Penick, his real Little Red Book that he had was a journal where he would write down, if he gave a lesson and he helped somebody, he would write down what he did to help them. And he put it in category like pulling putts. So here's a couple of things I did to help people that were pulling putts, or it would be something like that. And so I'm a lot more analytical than Harvey was. And so what I did is I went back and I took the ball flight influences, the impact factors, path face, angle of attack, centeredness, contact, and speed. And I tried to think of, so I broke it into more of a formula. This I think will help all of the teachers that are listening. But so what I did was I tried to figure out, okay, what affects each one of these things at address? How can you change them? On the backswing, what changes can you make? And then on the downswing. And then I would try to think of on all of these, once I had the principles in line, so on all of these, what would be good verbal cues that I could give them that have helped? What would be good visual cues that I could give them what would help? And then what training aids or drills or kinesthetic cues could I give them that would help? And so just as a for instance, so let's say club face. So I want to get the club face more closed. Okay, so at address, the obvious thing would be, for me, the principles of club face are grip and wrist action. It are basically the principles that govern where the face is at impact. So you go, if I want to get the face more closed, you strengthen the grip. Obviously, on the backswing, as you go back, you would try to hood the club or try to bow your left wrist at the top. Would be a way to close the face more, let's say. On the downswing, if the ball was still slicing, you could go with pronation through impact, or you could go through flipping the club more, going toward more extension through impact in order to get the face closed. And so each one of those, you would try and match it up to what the player already does. And so with all of my students, that's what I try and do. So I go through, I have all of this sort of stuff that I go through. So, for instance, I teach Andrew Landry, who plays the PGA Tour. He's won a couple of times, good player, but he has a mega strong grip. And so he has to have the face not snap shut, he has to use basically a reverse roll through impact. And so he needs more right side bend to get his right elbow more under the club, if you will. He has to have a lot more rotation in order to get that side bend to create the extension through impact that he needs for power. And so he came to me and didn't want to change his grip. So then on the other hand, Corey Pavin came to me, and he had a very, very weak grip. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to hit it farther, and he wanted to draw the ball when he wanted to. Not always. He played a low fade most of the time, but always he wanted to draw the ball. And so I said, well, that'd be easy. We'd just change your grip. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. I've tried to do that, and that didn't work, so I'm not changing my grip. So here's this guy with this really, really weak grip. Goes back, he lays the club off dramatically on the top, and then as he comes down, it gets real steep, hits a low bullet fade, and he wants to hit a high draw. And so, okay, now, just taking those tools, okay, so what have I got to do to hit a high draw? I got to get the path a little bit more from the inside. I've got to get him where he's not de-lofting the club so much, more behind the ball, and then I've got to find some way to get this face closed. And so we worked a lot of closed stance drills, a lot on deepening this hand path, getting the club to look more like it was not laid off, but more across the line looking, and so on and so forth. And then trying to get him to feel a lot of deceleration so that the club would flip over through impact in order to do that. And he did it. He played great as well. He won 5. We worked a year and a half, and he won 5 tournaments. And one of them was his major, his U.S. Open. And so I think that's something I've been lucky with. Jason Duffner, we put him on K-Vest. We 3D'd him. And his shoulders would always peak before his hips. And so you really couldn't rely on his lower body shallowing the club out. And that's what I noticed when I started working with him, is that he was upright, but when he would stay overplaying all the way down, and then he would go down the line and then lay the face back through impact. So he couldn't hit it either long or straight. And so,
That's a
And
good combination, isn't it?
yeah. So what I found out was that the closer I got him to the plane he needed to swing on the downswing on the backswing, then he didn't need his lower body to shallow because he was already shallow. And that's why his swing looked so flat. So that was a totally different. That was really just matching up to suit him, but still working with the same principles that I believe in.
So when Jason Duffner first came to you, was he then more upright initially?
Yes. Yeah, he was upright, and then he would come down above plane, and then he would reverse his hands through impact, which would lay the face back, so he never knew what loft he was going to have. And so he couldn't hit it really long or straight. And so we worked on making him feel like he rotated the face more going back, is what got him flatter. And then he could just try to cover the heck out of the ball as much as he wanted, and he'd never come over the top.
Amazing, and you can see that, can't you? I think you see that in him when you see him play. Very rounded, great turn through. Ultimately looks like he knows where the ball's going.
Yeah,
there must be times, I'm sure I read, where especially if you look players that you've worked with, whether it be Payne, Duffner, Keegan Bradley, and I'll go there first. Keegan Bradley is a really interesting player to watch, for a lot of reasons. One in how he sort of presents himself to the ball and his routine, and two being he's quite a different build to a lot of people. In terms of how he takes his posture to the ball, like knee bend, low, but phenomenal player.
Well, quite truthfully, statistically, over the last 10 years, he's been the best ball striker on tour, by far. I mean, nobody close to him. He's one of the few guys that was top 10 in distance and accuracy. He was top 10 in greens and regulation. If you look at his statistics over the last 10 years, he's been a phenomenal ball striker. And when I worked with him, I really didn't work much on his golf swing. He was a god-awful chipper and pitcher of the ball and distance wedge player. I mean, we go out and I got him on TrackMan. I said, okay, let me see you hit a 60-yard shot. So he hits this 60-yard shot about 70 feet in the air with no spin, has 2,000 spin, has less than driver spin on this ball. It's this blooper up there. And I thought, well, he's just, it was a mistake. No, that's what he did. And so, I mean, it was phenomenal to me. So teaching him how to flight wedges down and create spin and things like that was a big part. And had exactly the same problem in chipping. All he could do was hit bowling balls. And so we worked a lot on teaching him how to spin the ball around the green and helped him out a lot. And that was basically what we worked on. And at the time I worked with him, he was still using the belly putter initially.
Because he's had loads of different putters and stances and grips.
Oh, yeah.
As a spectator watching.
Well, he tried to change to a conventional putter when we were working together, and that didn't go very well for him. And so now he's using the arm lock, and that's helped him quite a bit, I think. So.
And how did you go about changing this almost complete wedge technique to create more spin? Did you have to adjust his setup and let some of his dynamics work, or in a way, have you had to park his long game in one space and develop some of the other areas of his game separately?
Yeah, I mean, with his long game, I wasn't worried about it. I mean, he always hit it. Occasionally he'd block it, but he was upright, and then he'd shallow out, and sometimes he'd drop under and block it, but it wasn't an issue because it didn't happen very often, and it wasn't something that we were ever concerned with. And then with his other shots, we worked a lot with TrackMan, trying to get launch angles under 30 with his distance wedge shots and trying to get 150 RPMs of backspin per yard of carry. So we were working a lot with TrackMan on that. It was funny, one time, at the same time I was working with Luke Donald, who's the best short game player in the world. And so they were buddies, and we were at the Bears Club practicing, and Keegan hit one of the great distance wedge shots for him. So he said, "Take a look at that." He says, "Take a look at that." He says, "How about that? 60 yards, 9,000 spin. Take that, Luke." Luke just laughed at him. So Luke then hit a shot that went 43 yards in the air with 11,000 RPMs spin. He says, "Keep practicing, Keegan. Keep practicing."
And when you get close to some of these guys, you really appreciate the quality, don't you, of not just the strike and the sound, and their ability to control the ball almost to demand.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. They are so much different. The spread between the average amateur and the touring professional now is greater than it's ever been. These guys are phenomenal. I don't work with anybody other than competitive players, and I've got a lot of really good high school players I work with and college players and so forth, but there's no comparison. You go out and play golf with them, and unless they're really, really exceptional juniors or college players, then the tour players of today are just unbelievable.
And when you say that, Chuck, what makes them so much better? Because if you look statistically at how far they hit it, some of the kids coming through college can hit it a mile. But obviously, when you say they're nowhere near the tour players, what ingredients would you say they're missing relative to these guys?
Well, I think you see that. I think you see a limited number of college players that are obviously the Victor Hovlands and the Matthew Wolfs and the guys like that have done Colin Morikawa and the guys that have won out there. Yeah, you have some that are at tour level. But even, I teach at the University of Texas Golf Club. So I teach where the University of Texas team practices. So with Jordan Spieth was there, and Bo Hostler. I work with Bo Hostler, who is there, and so on and so forth. And I take them out to play with them. I take these other guys out to play with them. Some of the other college kids I work with, so forth, and they're just, some of them may hit it as far, but they don't hit it with the same quality. They don't have all the shots, all of the different variances that the good players have. And I have some juniors that actually hit it farther than some of the tour players, but they've got a lot to learn in order to play it.
And you mentioned there Luke Donald. Luke was, world number one, probably one of the best short games in the world, if not the best short game in the world at that moment in time. And then he decided to change things to become better, as all good players do, don't they? You know what I mean? Nobody's ever satisfied with what they've got. Tiger's probably the ultimate for that, and then he decides, and obviously he comes into your camp as well.
Yeah, and it was obvious. Luke came to me because he hadn't won a major championship, and I'd had success in helping guys get to that level. And so he came to me, and it was obvious where his problems were. He was just not a good driver of the ball. It's really hard to win a U.S. Open or something when you can't drive the ball, when you hit it short and crooked, which is what he did. And so, our whole intent was to make his driving better. He was upright, and then he stayed upright coming into the ball, and then he would try to level out the club at the bottom with his hands. And so he had a steep swing that was trying to use his hands to level it out and square the face. And so what I tried to get him to do was try to get him more round, more level into the ball. Our success was how many plus shot out on TrackMan for attack angle. We wanted some plus shots. And, it was hard for him. It was really hard for him. He had some issues with internal rotation of his right shoulder, where it was not easy for him to go around a lot, where he couldn't shallow it out enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm back. We're back. I've just lost your sound, Chuck. Tom, do not worry. I'm saving the Hogan question.
Okay,
Well,
we're back.
Sorry, Chuck, I lost you, and then all of a sudden I got no sound, and then we completely disappeared. So
Yeah,
you were telling me about, you were talking about Luke Donald and him needing to start to use his body.
Yeah, we tried to, that's what I tried to do with him, was try to shallow him out into the ball, and mostly with the drive. And he did drive it somewhat better. We got him up to 115 miles an hour club head speed on my TrackMan several times, where he'd been 108, 109. And we got a lot of positive attack angles, going up, hitting up on the ball a little bit more. But it took a toll. He had a hard time. He had a lot of good finishes. He had 6 top 5s that year and a win in Japan. So he had some real success, but for the most part, it wasn't a great year, and he didn't come close in the majors, which is what he came to me for. And so we only worked together that one year.
And I suppose sometimes, when you've had your own pattern for a period of time, 20 years, where it's become ingrained, and then you try and take on new information, and then you've got to incorporate it into your play and trust it in probably the biggest tournaments in the world. You imagine it needs a bit of time sometimes to be able to trust it at that level after, what would feel like quite a big change.
Well, it was a change. I tried big with him, rather than little, because it was a big goal, to try. Yeah. And he had a big problem, so, and he still has that problem. He still is not a good driver of the ball. But, for him, he felt like he lost his short game to a certain degree by working so much on his long game. And so he was afraid of that, for sure. Yeah. And so we talked about it, and he said, I think I'm going to go with Pat, and because I'm a short game the way it was. And it wasn't like it was a bad short game. I always thought it was magnificent, and obviously I didn't ever do anything with the short game. It was so good, yeah. But so that was my story. He's a great guy, still a good friend, and we get along well. And I root for him so hard every term. Yeah. That's for sure.
And I mean, every player's obviously got strengths and weaknesses to their game, and bearing in mind what their physical condition is and how their body can and can't move. Probably all players' motions suit some area of the game where there'll be a strength and a weakness. It's just a shame if the way the modern game is, where it's about distance and your weakness is off the tee. If playing against players who could potentially hit it 20, 30 yards past you, you're going to have a hard time keeping up.
Well, and I think, money is with these guys. Uh, you don't change anything if they can reach their goals without changing. If you know what I mean there. So, like Lee Trevino, like if he came to me, he said, I want to win the Masters, I would have told him, well, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to learn to draw the ball, hit it higher, so on and so forth for that particular golf tournament. But I wouldn't have tried to change his swing to play the professional tour and win 9 majors. He's already done that. And so the same thing with Luke. So with Luke, it was a gamble because of the fact that he had been number 1 in the world, had played great. He never performed particularly well in major championships, and that was really something that he wanted to his resume. And so, I talked with him about it, and he and I both felt like it was worth the gamble to try and make a substantial change in his swing in order to help him be a better driver of the ball so that he could win a major championship or two.
I mean, one of the other things I read was how you helped Payne Stewart win the US Open. And what you did with Payne Stewart the week of the Open and the days just before the Open to actually, get the trophy at Pinehurst? If I remember right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I just found the strategy to the wedge play really interesting.
It was interesting because with Payne, he was sort of like Keegan Bradley. We never worked.
I just lost you a little bit. Let me. Oh, man. Andreas, look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Oh, we're back now. Sorry, I'd just say that I'd lost you there, so I thought, I'm going to have to turn off and go back. I don't know what happens. Somebody said with one of the interviews I was doing the other day, Mac O'Grady was out there pulling the wires so that no one could tell the answer. But yeah, Payne Stewart and the concept around winning the US Open.
Yeah, and like for Payne was very much of a field player. And so I never showed Payne his swing on video ever, the whole time I worked with him, 10 years. And I would just work with him to fix shots, so if he was slicing it, we'd stand there and have high hook contest. Or if he was overhooking it or hitting it too high, we'd go behind trees and have low ball contests and stuff like that in order to balance out his swing. And so with Payne, he was a wonderful ball striker. He had great rhythm and timing. With
great dress sense.
Pardon?
Great dress.
Yes.
Great dress.
He wasn't a range rat. I had to work with him to get him to ever go to the range, but we'd play games. So anyway, the biggest problem Payne had was because of his personality, he had attention deficit disorder. And so it's very hard for him to focus for any given period of time. And so he worked with Dick Coop and as a sports psychologist, educational psychologist, really. And so he worked with Dick. And so what Dick tried to do was to always give Payne structure. So this is your pre-swing routine. This is your signal to start your pre-swing routine, all of that sort of stuff. And so with me, Dick told me, he said, that's what you need to give him with his game is structure for his practice. So we used to do games. So we'd do drills. is how I'd get him to practice. Make so many putts from here, try to land this ball on a towel and make it stop within a club length of the hole, and so on and so forth. So anyway, when we were, before Pinehurst, we were going to meet at the Memphis tournament the week before, and he missed the cut. And so I said, well, wait for me. I was doing an outing up in Pennsylvania. I said, wait for me. I'll come down, then we'll fly over to Pinehurst together. So I went down, we flew to Pinehurst. So we got there on Saturday before the championship week and had done golf schools for Golf Digest at Pinehurst probably 50 weeks in my life. So I really knew the golf course well. And I said, Payne, this golf course, the way the greens are, is a chipping golf course. Nobody's going to hit a lot of greens. And it turned out that was true. I mean, when Keimer won, he hit 42 greens. When Payne won, he hit 43 greens. So it's hard to hit greens there because they're like upside down bowls. The ball runs off the green. And I said, the big deal is to leave your ball when you miss the green, so leave it in a place where you can get it up and down. And there's some places you just can't do that. And so we took just chipping clubs and a putter and went out on Saturday and Sunday, just walked around the golf course, and we had gotten yardage books. And he saw me marking one. He says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm marking spots in your book where you cannot get up and down from. He says, okay, put it in red. So I'll know. I said, no, I don't want you afraid. I'm going to mark it blue, but you don't want to be here. And so we said, ideally, so in this book, there's a lot of places in Pinehurst around those greens you cannot get up and down from, where the green runs away from you and you're down a hill and all that stuff. And I said, what you want to do is, unless you're hitting a wedge, you want to aim for the middle of the white area in your yardage book. So, for instance, the eighth hole, if the pin was behind the green and to the left, was dead. You could not get up and down from. It's where John Daly went off. I don't know if you ever remember seeing that story, but he just putted it up the hill because he couldn't get it to the green any other way. And so we marked an X on that hole. No matter where the pin is on that hole, the X was front right of the green. It was long par 4, converted par 5. And so the first day, the pin was back left. And he aims at the X and pulls it at a foot from the hole. But it aimed at the hole and pulled it, he'd have made a 6. So it saved you 3 shots right there at that one hole. And so that was sort of what we did there, is that he had go for any pins you got a wedge with, otherwise aim for the middle of the white area on your yardage book. And he only hit the blue area once the whole week.
Yeah, that's what I thought he'd said he'd never hit the blue area, but yeah, I mean, that's just immense discipline, though, isn't it? That, you know, irrelevant of the tournament, the condition, the pressure, you still stuck to the plan in order to do the job.
Absolutely. And the U.S. Open was a tournament where he could focus better because it's such a hard tournament, you know, or used to be. It's not anymore, but it used to be a really hard tournament, you know, with hard green, narrow fairways, high rough, and so forth. So he could focus on those.
Have you done that with any other players?
Pardon?
Have any of the other players done that with the strategy and things with you?
Yeah, I work with a lot of them, like Dylan Fratelli and Andrew Landry. Well, Landry played Augusta last year, but Dylan Fratelli qualified for Augusta for this year. And so having worked with so many players and probably been to the Masters working with players for 30 years plus, I know how they played it. I know the things that they look for. So, you know, I'm able to go with them and say, like on hole number 1, middle of the green, period. You do not ever aim at any other spot on that green, no matter what club you have. And then all your practice is short and to the right of the green. So when you're practicing your chipping, you're going to practice short and right. If you miss it left or long, you're dead. You cannot play that hole. And so go through things like that, you know, and sit down and talk with them, you know, about that. Like 4th hole, it's easier to get them down from that bunker on the left than it is anything to the right, you know. So And I just know that because of the fact that I've been with a lot of great players that have played in the Masters and know how they approached it, and so I'm able to pass that along, which is a good thing.
And I mean, if everything goes as planned this year, and the Masters is played in November or the end of the year, I don't exactly know what the date is on my head, but that golf course could play really quite different towards the end of the year than it would have done in April. So that could throw up almost a completely different strategy again in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's cold, that golf course is really long anyway, but if it's cold and wet, which it could be in November, then you've really cut the list of potential when it's passed. You know, you've got a lot of other players that can